The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of New Denver as Jake Morrison crouched behind a pile of twisted metal and broken concrete. The city that once housed 2 million people now stood empty, its tall buildings reduced to skeletal frames against the gray sky. 5 years had passed since the Zephyrians came from the stars, and Earth had never been the same. Jake pressed his back against the cold debris and checked his weapon. The old rifle had seen better days, but it still fired straight when he needed it to. Around him, 7 other humans waited in silence, their faces dirty and tired but determined. They were all that remained of the New Denver resistance cell, and today they would strike back against their alien oppressors. "Remember the plan," Jake whispered to his team. "We get in, grab the food supplies, and get out. No heroes, no unnecessary risks. We have families counting on us." Amy Rodriguez nodded from her position near the broken wall. She was barely 22, but the invasion had aged her beyond her years. Next to her, old Pete Williams gripped his shotgun with weathered hands. The former construction worker had lost his wife and 3 children in the first wave of attacks, and revenge burned in his eyes every day. The Zephyrian outpost sat 2 blocks away, a sleek metal structure that looked like a silver egg dropped from the sky. It hummed with alien energy, and Jake could see the tall, thin figures of the invaders moving around its perimeter. The Zephyrians stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to look right through humans, as if they were insects. "Move out," Jake ordered. The team crept through the rubble-filled streets, using the shadows of collapsed buildings for cover. The Zephyrians had sensors that could detect human movement, but the resistance had learned to move slowly and stay low. It was a game of cat and mouse that had kept them alive for 5 years. As they approached the outpost, Jake saw the food storage containers stacked near the main entrance. The Zephyrians took most of Earth's crops for themselves, leaving humans to survive on scraps. This raid would feed the resistance camp for weeks, but it would also anger their captors. "There," Amy pointed to a gap in the fence. "We can get through there." Jake was about to give the signal when something moved in the shadows near the outpost. A figure emerged from behind the building, and Jake's blood went cold. It was human shaped, but wore armor he had never seen before. The suit was sleek and black, with blue lines of energy running along its surface. The helmet covered the figure's face completely, but Jake could see the outline of a human body underneath. "Who is that?" Pete whispered. "I don't know." But something about the figure made him uneasy. The way it moved was too smooth, too perfect. It carried a weapon that glowed with the same blue energy as Zephyrian technology. The armored figure began to walk toward the storage containers, and Jake realized their plan was about to fall apart. If this person was working with the aliens, the resistance team would be walking into a trap. "Wait," Jake said, but it was too late. Amy had already started moving toward the fence. The moment she stepped into the open, alarms began to sound. The Zephyrians poured out of the outpost, their long limbs moving with surprising speed. Their weapons hummed to life, casting an eerie purple glow across the ruined street. "Run!" Jake shouted, but he knew it was hopeless. The aliens were too fast, and his team was caught in the open. The armored figure raised its weapon, and Jake expected to see his friends cut down. Instead, the weapon fired at the Zephyrians. Blue energy bolts struck the aliens, sending them stumbling backward. The figure moved like a dancer, dodging return fire while protecting the humans. "What's happening?" Amy called out as she dove. Behind a concrete barrier, Jake watched in amazement as the armored figure fought the aliens with their own weapons. Every movement was precise, every shot carefully aimed. But something was wrong. The figure hesitated before each attack, as if fighting against itself. "This way!" The figure called out, and Jake's heart stopped. The voice was human, and it sounded like a woman. The mysterious warrior led the resistance team through the chaos, creating a path of escape. When a Zephyrian raised its weapon toward Pete, the armored figure stepped between them, taking the blast on its chest armor. The energy dissipated harmlessly, but Jake saw the figure stumble. "Keep moving!" The woman shouted. Jake's team ran through the gap in the fence, grabbing what supplies they could carry. The armored figure covered their retreat, fighting off 6 Zephyrians at once. Her movements were incredible, almost superhuman, but Jake noticed something else. When the aliens fired toward the human civilians hiding in nearby buildings, the figure would redirect their attention to herself. As his team escaped into the ruins, Jake looked back one last time. The armored figure stood alone in the courtyard, surrounded by fallen Zephyrians. She turned toward him, and for a moment, Jake thought he saw something familiar in the way she held her head. The figure raised her hand, not in threat, but in what looked like a farewell gesture. Then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows as more Zephyrians arrived at the outpost. Jake's team ran for 20 minutes before stopping to catch their breath. They had escaped with enough food to last weeks, but everyone was confused and shaken. "Who was that?" Amy asked, checking her weapon. "And why did she help us?" "I don't know," Jake said, but he kept thinking about the figure's voice. It had sounded so familiar, but he couldn't place it. "She had alien weapons," Pete said, spitting on the ground. "She's probably one of their experiments. You know, they take humans and do things to them." Jake nodded, but something didn't feel right. The figure had saved them, protected civilians, and fought against the Zephyrians. If she was working with the aliens, why help the resistance? As they made their way back to the hidden camp, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen the armored figure before. The way she moved, the way she had protected his team, it reminded him of someone, but that was impossible. The person he was thinking of had died 5 years ago during the invasion. Back at the camp, Jake distributed the supplies while his team told their story to the other survivors. Children gathered around to hear about the mysterious warrior who had saved them. In a world where humans had little to celebrate, any victory against the Zephyrians was cause for hope. That night, Jake sat by the small fire in his shelter and stared at the stars. Somewhere up there, the Zephyrian fleet waited in orbit, controlling Earth from above. The aliens had superior technology, unlimited resources, and time on their side. Humanity was losing the war, one day at a time, but today, a lone figure had fought against the invaders and saved human lives. Jake didn't know who she was or why she had helped them, but he knew he would see her again. In a war where hope was rare, she had given them something to believe in. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake thought about the voice he had heard. It haunted him, reminding him of better days before the invasion. He tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. The voice belonged to someone important, someone he had lost long ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights against the Zephyrians. But tonight, Jake Morrison allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as alone as they thought. 3 weeks passed after the food raid, and Jake Morrison felt like he was going crazy. Every mission his team planned went wrong before it even started. The Zephyrians knew exactly where they would be and when they would arrive. It was as if someone was reading his mind and telling the aliens all his secrets. Jake paced back and forth in the underground bunker that served as their headquarters. The concrete walls were covered with maps and plans, but none of it mattered if they had a spy among them. He looked at the faces of his team members, people he had trusted with his life for years. Could one of them be working with the enemy? "We need to talk," Amy said, entering the bunker with Pete and the others. Her face was grim, and Jake knew she was thinking the same thing he was. "Someone is giving information to the Zephyrians," Pete said, his old hands shaking with anger. "There's no other explanation." Jake nodded but felt sick to his stomach. These people were all he had left in the world. The thought that one of them might be a traitor was almost too much to bear. "We'll set a trap," Jake decided. "I'll give different information to each person about our next mission. Whoever's information the Zephyrians act on will know who the spy is." The plan was simple but painful. Jake told Amy they would hit the north storage facility at dawn. He told Pete they would attack the south checkpoint at noon. To each team member, he gave a different target and time. Then he waited to see which location the Zephyrians would guard most heavily, but something unexpected happened. The armored figure appeared at every single location Jake had mentioned. She stood guard at the north facility at dawn, moved to the south checkpoint by noon, and was seen at 3 other positions throughout the day. It was impossible for one person to move that quickly, but Jake's scouts confirmed it was the same woman each time. "She's not human," Amy whispered when they met that evening. "No human can move that fast or be in so many places at once." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The armored figure wasn't just helping them anymore. She was hunting them, staying one step ahead of every move they made. But why had she saved them during the food raid only to track them down later? The next morning brought terrible news. The Zephyrians had found and destroyed the Rodriguez family's hiding place. Amy's parents and younger brother were gone, taken to the alien processing centers where humans disappeared forever. Amy sat in the corner of the bunker, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't make a sound. "We have to do something," Pete said, loading his shotgun. "We can't keep hiding while they pick us off one by one." Jake knew Pete was right, but every plan they made seemed to fail before it started. The armored figure was always there, always watching, always ready to stop them. But there was something about her behavior that didn't make sense. She could have killed them all by now if she wanted to, but she never did. She just appeared, made their missions impossible, and disappeared again. That afternoon, Jake made a decision that his team thought was insane. He would go to the old subway tunnels alone and try to draw out the armored figure. If she wanted to hunt him, he would make it easy for her. At least then his team would be safe. "You're going to get yourself killed," Amy said, grabbing his arm. "We stick together. That's how we've survived this long. And look where it's gotten." "US," Jake replied. 3 more families taken last week, and we haven't completed a successful mission in a month. Something has to change." Jake left the bunker at sunset, carrying only his rifle and a small pack. The subway tunnels stretched for miles beneath the city, dark and flooded with 2 feet of stagnant water. The Zephyrians rarely came down here because their technology didn't work well in the damp environment. He walked for 2 hours, his boots splashing through the murky water. The silence was broken only by the sound of dripping water and the distant hum of alien machinery above. Jake was beginning to think his plan had failed when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw her. The armored figure stood 30 feet away, her weapon lowered but ready. In the dim light filtering down from the street above, Jake could see that her armor was damaged. There were scorch marks on her chest and arms, and one of the blue energy lines was flickering. "You're alone," the figure said, and again Jake felt that strange familiarity in her voice. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of running," Jake replied, keeping his rifle pointed at the ground. "I want to know who you are and why you're doing this to us." The figure took a step forward, and Jake could see her more clearly. She was definitely human in shape and size, but the armor made her look alien. The helmet covered her face completely, but Jake could see the outline of human features underneath. "I'm trying to save you," she said, and her voice carried a pain that made Jake's heart ache. "Every time I try to help, more people die. Every time I stay away, more people die. I don't know what to do anymore." Jake lowered his rifle completely. There was something in her voice that he recognized, a sadness that went deeper than the war. "Who are you?" The figure was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Someone who lost everything 5 years ago. Someone who's been forced to do terrible things to survive." "The Zephyrians are making you work for them," Jake said, understanding flooding through him. "They're controlling you somehow." "Not completely," the figure replied. "I have moments when I can think clearly, when I can choose what to do. But those moments are getting shorter. Soon I'll be nothing but their weapon." Jake took a step toward her, and she raised her weapon. "Don't," she said. "I'm dangerous. Even now, I can feel them trying to take control." "Then why did you help us during the food raid?" Jake asked. "If they're controlling you, why save us?" "Because in that moment I remembered who I used to be," the figure said. "I remembered caring about people, about protecting the innocent. But it's getting harder to remember." The figure reached into a compartment on her armor and pulled out a small device. She threw it to Jake, and he caught it reflexively. It was a data pad, alien technology, but modified with human components. The Zephyrians are planning something big, she said. They call it the Great Harvest. In 6 days, they're going to move every human on Earth to their mining colonies. After that, they'll strip the planet bare. Jake looked at the device in his hands. The information on it could save what was left of humanity, but he still didn't understand why she was helping him. There's more, the figure continued. The location of their command ship, the frequencies they use for communication, the weakness in their shield generators, everything you need to fight back. Why are you giving this to me? Jake asked. The figure was quiet for so long that Jake thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with an emotion he couldn't identify. Because tomorrow night I might not be me anymore, she said. Tomorrow night, Warehouse District, Section 7. If you want to know the truth, come alone. But Jake, if I'm not myself when you get there, you have to promise me something. Jake's heart stopped. She had used his name, but more than that, she had said it in a way that was achingly familiar. What? Promise me you'll do what needs to be done, she said. Don't let them use me to hurt more people. Before Jake could respond, the figure turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the tunnel. Jake stood alone in the darkness, holding the data pad that might save humanity, but all he could think about was the way she had said his name. He knew that voice. He had heard it in his dreams for 5 years, had carried it in his heart through the darkest days of the war. But that was impossible. The person who owned that voice was dead, killed during the first day of the invasion. Jake looked at the data pad again, then at the tunnel where the figure had disappeared. Tomorrow night he would have his answers. Tomorrow night he would learn the truth about the armored figure who had been hunting and helping them. As he walked back through the tunnels, Jake whispered a name into the darkness, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in 5 years. He was probably wrong, probably letting hope cloud his judgment, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the impossible might be true. Tomorrow night would tell him everything. Jake Morrison stood outside the abandoned warehouse in Section 7, his heart beating so fast he thought it might explode. The night air was cold against his skin, and the broken windows of the building stared down at him like dead eyes. He had come alone, just as the armored figure had asked, but every instinct told him this was a trap. The warehouse district had been empty since the invasion began. The Zephyrians had no use for human manufacturing, so they let the buildings rot and fall apart. Weeds grew through cracks in the concrete, and rust covered everything metal. It was the perfect place for secrets, the perfect place for answers. Jake checked his watch. It was almost midnight. He had been waiting for 20 minutes, and part of him wondered if she would show up at all. Maybe the aliens had taken complete control of her mind. Maybe she was leading him into an ambush right now. Then he heard footsteps echoing from inside the warehouse. Slow, careful steps that seemed to hesitate with each movement. Jake drew his pistol but kept it lowered. He had made a promise to himself that he would listen before he acted, no matter how afraid he was. The main door of the warehouse creaked open, and the armored figure stepped into the moonlight. She looked different tonight. Her armor was cleaner, and the blue energy lines were glowing steadily. But there was something else, something in the way she held herself that seemed more human than before. You came, she said, and Jake heard relief in her voice. I wasn't sure you would. I had to know, Jake replied, keeping his distance. I had to know who you are. The figure nodded and walked to the center of the empty space between them. The moonlight streaming through the broken roof made her armor shine like silver. Jake could see that her hands were shaking, and he realized she was as nervous as he was. Before I show you, she said, you need to understand something. What? You're about to see will change everything. Once you know the truth, you can't go back to not knowing. Jake swallowed hard. I'm ready. I don't think anyone can be ready for this, the figure said sadly. But I can't carry this secret anymore. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. She reached up with both hands and grabbed the sides of her helmet. For a moment she paused, as if gathering courage. Then, with a soft hiss of escaping air, She pulled the helmet off and let it fall to the ground. Jake's world stopped. The face looking back at him was older, thinner, marked by years of pain and suffering. But it was a face he knew better than his own. It was a face he had seen in his dreams every night for 5 years. It was a face he had thought he would never see again. "Hello, Jake," Lisa Carter said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry I kept you waiting so long." Jake's pistol clattered to the ground. His legs felt weak, and he had to lean against a concrete pillar to keep from falling. This was impossible. Lisa had died during the first day of the invasion. He had seen her apartment building collapse. He had searched through the rubble for days, calling her name until his voice gave out. "You're dead," he whispered. "I saw you die," Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I should have died," she said. "I wanted to die. But the Zephyrians had other plans for me." Jake stared at her, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This was Lisa, but she was different. Her brown hair was shorter now, and there were scars on her face and neck. Her eyes, once bright with laughter, now held a sadness that seemed to go on forever. "How?" Jake asked, his voice barely audible. Lisa sat down on a piece of broken machinery, suddenly looking very tired. "When the building collapsed, I was trapped in the basement. The Zephyrians found me 3 days later, barely alive. They took me to one of their ships." She touched the back of her neck, and Jake saw a thin scar running from her hairline to her collar. "They'd put things in my brain, Jake, machines that let them control what I think and do. They wanted to see if they could turn humans into perfect soldiers." Jake felt sick. The thought of what she had been through, what they had done to her, was almost too much to bear. "How long?" he asked. 5 years, Lisa said. 5 years of being their puppet, of doing things I never wanted to do. They made me fight other humans, Jake. They made me hurt people who were just trying to survive." Jake moved closer to her, and she looked up at him with eyes full of pain. "But you helped us," he said. "During the food raid, you saved my team." Lisa nodded. "The control isn't perfect. Sometimes when I'm under stress or when I feel strong emotions, I can break through. I can be myself for a few minutes or hours. Those moments are all I have left." "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Jake asked. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Lisa stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ruined city. "Because I'm dangerous, Jake. Even now, I can feel them trying to take control. They know I'm here, talking to you. They're angry." Jake saw her body tense, and for a moment her expression changed. It became cold and empty, like a machine. Then she shook her head violently and grabbed onto the window frame. "I don't have much time," she said quickly. "The information I gave you is real. The Great Harvest starts in 4 days, not 6. They moved up the timeline because they know the Resistance is planning something. We'll figure out a way to stop them," Jake said, moving toward her. "We'll find a way to get those things out of your head." Lisa turned around, and Jake saw tears streaming down her face. "There is no way, Jake. The implants are too deep, too. Connected to my brain. If you try to remove them, I'll die." "Then we'll find another way," Jake said desperately. "We'll find a way to break their control." Lisa smiled, but it was the saddest smile Jake had ever seen. "There is a way," she said, "but you won't like it." She walked back to where she had dropped her helmet and picked it up. "The signal that controls the implants comes from their command ship. If that ship is destroyed, all the controlled humans will be freed. But someone has to get close enough to plant the explosives." Jake understood what she was saying, and his heart sank. "You want to do it yourself." "I'm the only one who can," Lisa said, putting her helmet back on. "I have access to the ship. I know where the weak points are. And when the time comes, I'll be able to resist their control long enough to complete the mission." "No," Jake said firmly. "There has to be another way." Lisa's voice came through the helmet speakers now, distorted and mechanical. "Jake, listen to me. This is the only chance we have. If the Great Harvest happens, humanity is finished. Every person on Earth will be enslaved or killed." Jake felt tears on his own cheeks now. Finding Lisa alive should have been the happiest moment of his life, but instead, it felt like losing her all over again. "I can't let you do this," he said. "I just got you back." Lisa walked over to him and took his hands in her armored gloves. You never lost me, Jake. Even when they controlled my body, even when they made me do terrible things, part of me was always with you. That's how I was able to resist. That's how I was able to help you. She reached into her armor and pulled out a small device. This contains the complete layout of their command ship, their security codes, and the exact location where the explosives need to be placed. Give it to your team. Tell them to be ready. Jake took the device, his hands shaking. When? Tomorrow. Night, Lisa said. During the new moon, when their sensors are weakest, I'll create a distraction to get you and your team inside. After that, it's up to you. Lisa stepped back, and Jake could see her fighting against the implants again. Her body jerked once, then became still. I have to go, she said, her voice strained. They're calling me back, but Jake, remember what I told you. No matter what happens, no matter what you see me do, remember that I love you. I've always loved you. Before Jake could respond, Lisa turned and ran toward the warehouse door. She moved with inhuman speed, her armor carrying her faster than any person should be able to run. In seconds, she was gone, leaving Jake alone with the device and the knowledge that would save humanity. Jake stood in the empty warehouse for a long time, staring at the spot where Lisa had disappeared. He had found her alive, but he was about to lose her again. The woman he loved was trapped inside a machine, and the only way to free her was to destroy the very thing keeping her alive. As he walked back through the ruined streets, Jake made a decision. He would use the information Lisa had given him. He would save humanity from the Great Harvest. But he would also find a way to save Lisa, even if it seemed impossible. He had lost her once before. He wouldn't lose her again. Jake Morrison stood in the underground bunker, looking at the faces of 43 resistance fighters. These were all the humans left in New Denver who could still fight. Some were old, some were young, but all of them had lost someone they loved to the Zephyrians. Tonight, they would either save humanity or die trying. The command ship is here, Jake said, pointing to the map on the wall. It's floating 2 miles above the city center. Lisa's information shows us 3 ways to get inside, but only one will work without triggering their main defenses. Amy Rodriguez studied the plan with tired eyes. She had barely slept since learning that the armored figure was Lisa Carter, Jake's lost love. The air vents are too small for most of us, she said, and the cargo bay is heavily guarded. That leaves the waste disposal system, Pete Williams said, making a face. We'll have to swim through alien sewage to get inside. Jake nodded. It's not pretty, but it's our best chance. Lisa will create a distraction on the other side of the ship to draw their attention away from us. The plan was simple but dangerous. Jake would lead a team of 12 fighters up to the command ship through the waste system. Once inside, they would split into 3 groups. One group would plant explosives in the engine room. Another would destroy the communication center. The third group, led by Jake, would find the main control room and shut down the signal that controlled all the implanted humans. What about Lisa? Amy asked quietly. How do we know she won't turn on us once we're inside? Jake had been asking himself the same question all day. Lisa had warned him that her control over the implants was getting weaker. She might not be able to resist the Zephyrian programming when it mattered most. We don't know, Jake said honestly. But she's risked everything to give us this chance. We have to trust her. The team spent the rest of the day preparing. They checked their weapons, studied the ship's layout, and said goodbye to the people they might never see again. Jake found himself thinking about Lisa, wondering if she was still fighting the voices in her head, or if the aliens had taken complete control. As the sun set, Jake gathered his team at the old subway entrance. They had found a way to reach the command ship through the city's water treatment plant. The Zephyrians had connected their ship to the city's systems to process waste, never thinking that humans would be desperate enough to use it as a way inside. Remember, Jake told his team, once we're inside, we move fast and quiet. We have maybe 20 minutes before they realize we're there. After that, it's going to be a fight. The team entered the water treatment plant through a hole in the fence. The building was dark and empty, filled with the sound of flowing water and humming machinery. Jake led them to the main processing chamber, where a large pipe rose up toward the ceiling and disappeared into the night sky. There, Jake pointed up. That pipe goes directly to the command ship. We climb up, and we're inside. The climb was harder than Jake had expected. The pipe was slippery and narrow, and the smell made him want to throw up. But after 30 minutes of climbing, they reached the top and found themselves inside the alien ship. The command ship was like nothing Jake had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange. Symbols covered every surface, and the air hummed with energy. Jake could feel the power of the ship around him, and it made him understand how hopeless their fight had been. "This way," Jake whispered, leading his team down a corridor that glowed with blue light. According to Lisa's information, the main control room was 3 levels up and to the right. They had been moving for 10 minutes when the alarm started. Red lights began flashing, and a voice spoke in the alien language over hidden speakers. Jake's heart sank. They had been discovered. Run! Jake shouted, and his team sprinted down the corridor. Zephyrian soldiers appeared from side passages, their tall forms moving with deadly grace. They carried weapons that fired beams of purple energy, and Jake watched in horror as one of his fighters was hit and simply disappeared in a flash of light. "Keep moving," Jake yelled, firing his rifle at the aliens. His bullets bounced off their armor, but the impact made them stumble. The team fought their way through the ship, losing 2 more fighters in the process. Jake's heart broke each time someone fell, but he knew they had to keep going. If they failed, everyone on Earth would die or become a slave. They reached the main control room to find it heavily defended. 8 Zephyrian soldiers stood guard, and their weapons were already powered up. Jake's team took cover behind strange alien machinery, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "We need a miracle," Amy said, reloading her weapon. That's when Lisa appeared. She came through the main door like a force of nature, moving faster than Jake had ever seen her move. Her armor was damaged and sparks flew from several joints, but her weapons were working perfectly. She attacked the Zephyrian guards with incredible skill, her movements flowing like water. "Go!" Lisa shouted to Jake. "Get to the control center!" Jake ran past the fighting, his team following close behind. The control center was a large room filled with screens and panels covered in alien writing. In the center of the room was a tall cylinder that pulsed with blue light. "That's it," Jake said, remembering Lisa's instructions. "That's the signal transmitter." He pulled out the explosive device Lisa had given him and attached it to the base of the cylinder. The timer was set for 2 minutes, enough time to escape if they were lucky. "Jake!" Amy screamed. Jake turned to see Lisa standing in the doorway. But something was wrong. Her armor was smoking, and her movements were jerky and unnatural. Her helmet was cracked, and Jake could see her face through the broken visor. Her eyes were empty, like a machine. "The mission is complete," Lisa said in a voice that wasn't her own. "Now you must be eliminated." She raised her weapon, and Jake realized that the Zephyrians had finally taken complete control of her mind. The woman he loved was gone, replaced by an alien puppet program to kill him. "Lisa," Jake said, not moving away from the explosives. "I know you're still in there. You have to fight them." Lisa's weapon powered up, the blue energy building to a deadly charge. "Lisa Carter is dead," she said in that mechanical voice. "I am a weapon of the Zephyrian Empire." Jake looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of the woman he loved. For a moment, he thought he saw something flicker behind the emptiness. A tiny spark of humanity fighting against the alien control. "Remember what you told me," Jake said desperately. "You said that part of you was always with me. You said that's how you were able to resist." Lisa hesitated, her weapon wavering slightly. Jake could see her struggling against the programming, her body shaking with the effort. "I love you," Jake said. "I've always loved you, even when I thought you were dead. That love is stronger than their machines." For a moment, Lisa's eyes cleared. She looked at Jake with recognition and love, and he saw the woman he had lost 5 years ago. But then the moment passed, and the emptiness returned. "Goodbye, Jake," Lisa said, but now it was her own voice. "Remember me as I was, not as I am." Now, she turned her weapon away from Jake and fired at the control panels around the room. Sparks flew as the alien technology exploded, and Jake realized what she was doing. She was destroying the ship's ability to control the signal, making sure that when the explosives went off, the transmission would be completely severed. "No!" Jake shouted, but it was too late. Lisa's damaged armor finally gave out and she collapsed to the floor. Jake ran to her side, ignoring the explosions around him. He knelt beside her and saw that she was badly hurt, but she was still alive. "Did we do it?" she whispered, her voice weak. Jake looked at the timer on the explosives. 30 seconds left. Around them, the ship's systems were failing as Lisa's sabotage took effect. Through the broken windows, Jake could see other Zephyrian ships in the sky beginning to drift aimlessly. "We did it," Jake said, taking her hand. "You did it." Lisa smiled, and for the first time in 5 years, it was a real smile. "Good," she said. "I'm tired of being their weapon. I want to be me again." The timer reached 10 seconds. Jake's team was already running for the escape pods, but Jake couldn't leave Lisa behind. He picked her up in his arms, her damaged armor, making her heavier than he expected. "Come on," he said. "We're getting out of here." But as they reached the corridor, Jake realized they wouldn't make it to the escape pods in time. The explosives would detonate in 5 seconds, and they were still too close to the control room. Lisa looked up at him with eyes that were completely her own. "Take off my mask," she whispered. "Then you'll know me." Jake didn't understand what she meant, but he didn't have time to ask. The explosion was coming, and all he could do was hold the woman he loved and hope that somehow they would survive what came next. The explosion shook the entire command ship like a giant hand had grabbed it and shaken it in anger. Jake Morrison held Lisa Carter tight against his chest as they were thrown against the wall of the corridor. The lights went out, then came back on, flickering red and orange as emergency systems tried to keep the ship alive through the broken windows. Jake could see the other Zephyrian ships in the sky. They were drifting without purpose, their lights dimming as the control signal died. Some were already falling toward the ground, their pilots no longer able to fly them. The plan had worked better than Jake had dared to hope. "Jake," Lisa whispered, her voice so quiet he almost couldn't hear her over the alarms. "The escape pods. You have to get to the escape pods." Jake looked down at her face through the cracked visor of her helmet. Her skin was pale, and there was blood on her lips. The explosion had damaged her armor's life support systems, and he could hear air hissing out through the cracks. "We'll go together," Jake said, trying to stand while holding her. "I'm not leaving you behind." Lisa shook her head weakly. "The radiation from the explosion," she said. "It's already too late for me, but you can still escape." Jake felt his heart breaking all over again. They had won the war, but it was going to cost him everything that mattered. He had found Lisa alive only to lose her again, and this time there would be no miracle to save her. "No," Jake said firmly. "We're both getting out of here." He managed to stand and began carrying Lisa toward the escape pod bay. Each step was harder than the last as the ship continued to shake and pieces of the ceiling fell around them. Lisa's armor was getting heavier as its systems failed, but Jake refused to give up. Behind them, Jake could hear the sound of metal tearing as the command ship began to break apart. The other members of his team had already escaped, and he hoped they were safe. Amy, Pete, and the others had families waiting for them on the ground. They deserved to see their loved ones again. "Jake, stop," Lisa said, and he could hear the pain in her voice. "Please." Jake stopped walking and looked down at her. Through the cracked visor, he could see that she was crying. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of peace. "I can feel it," Lisa said softly. "The voices in my head are gone. For the first time in 5 years, it's just me up here. Just me and my own thoughts." Jake knelt down and set Lisa gently on the floor, leaning her back against the wall. Around them, the ship continued to die, but for this moment, they were alone together. "The implants stopped working when the signal died," Lisa explained. "I'm finally free, Jake. I'm finally myself again." Jake reached for her helmet, wanting to see her face clearly. But Lisa caught his hand with her gloved fingers. "Wait," she said. "There's something I need to tell you first." Lisa looked up at the ceiling where sparks were falling like snow. "When they put the implants in my brain, they didn't just control my actions, they controlled my memories too. They made me forget things, made me remember things that never happened. But now that the signal is gone, I remember everything." Jake waited, not sure what she was trying to tell him. "I remember our first date," Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger. "You took me to that little restaurant on 5th Street, and you were so nervous you spilled coffee on your shirt. I remember the way you laughed at yourself and how that made me fall in love with you." Jake smiled through his tears. "I remember that too." "I remember our last fight," Lisa said, "the night before the invasion. We argued about whether to leave the city or stay and fight. You wanted to run, and I wanted to stay. We both said things we didn't mean," Jake nodded. That fight had haunted him for 5 years. Their last words to each other had been angry ones, and he had never been able to forgive himself for that. "I remember waking up in the rubble," Lisa continued. "I was trapped and hurt, and I knew I was going to die. But the last thing I thought about was you. I wanted to tell you I was sorry. I wanted to tell you that I loved you." Jake felt fresh tears on his cheeks. "I love you too," he said. "I never stopped loving you." Lisa smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. "I know," she said. "That's how I was able to resist them sometimes. Even when they controlled my mind, your love was still there, fighting against them." The ship shuddered again, and Jake knew they were running out of time. The escape pods were only 50 yards away, but Lisa was getting weaker with each passing moment. "Now," Lisa said, looking into Jake's eyes, "take off my mask, then you'll know me." Jake understood now what she meant. The mask wasn't just the helmet she wore. It was everything the Zephyrians had forced her to become. The soldier, the weapon, the puppet dancing to their commands. All of that was just a mask hiding the real Lisa underneath. With gentle hands, Jake reached up and removed Lisa's helmet completely. Her brown hair fell around her face, and he could see the scars the aliens had left on her neck and forehead. But he could also see her eyes, clear and bright and completely her own. "There you are," Jake whispered, touching her face with his fingertips. "I've been looking for you for 5 years." Lisa laughed, and it was the sound Jake had missed most of all. "I've been here the whole time," she said. "Hidden, but here, waiting for you to find me." Jake leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I'm sorry it took so long." "It's okay," Lisa said, her voice getting quieter. We have this moment." Around them, the ship was dying, but Jake didn't care. He had found Lisa again, really found her this time. Not the controlled soldier or the alien weapon, but the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Jake," Lisa said, her eyes closing, "tell me about the sunrise." Jake knew what she meant. On their first morning together, they had watched the sun rise over the city from the roof of her apartment building. She had said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "It's orange and pink," Jake said, holding her hand. "The light touches the tops of the buildings first, then spreads down like warm honey. The whole city glows like it's made of gold." Lisa smiled without opening her eyes. "I can see it," she said. "It's beautiful." Jake felt her hand go limp in. The life support systems in her armor gave one last beep and then went silent. Lisa Carter was gone, but this time Jake knew she had died as herself. Jake sat with her for a long time, holding her hand and watching the sparks fall around them. Eventually he heard voices calling his name. Amy and Pete had come back for him, risking their lives to make sure he escaped. "Jake," Amy called, "we have to go now." Jake looked down at Lisa one last time. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. The scars and the pain were gone from her face, replaced by the same serenity he remembered from their mornings together. "Thank you," Jake whispered to her. "Thank you for coming back to me." He stood up and walked toward the escape pod, leaving Lisa's helmet on the floor beside her. The mask was gone forever, and only the real Lisa remained. 3 days later, Jake stood in the ruins of New Denver, watching the sun rise over a world that was free again. The Zephyrian ships had all crashed or fled, and the few aliens left on the ground were surrendering to human forces. The nightmare was over. Amy joined him on the rooftop, holding a cup of real coffee they had found in an abandoned store. "The reports are coming in from around the world," she said. "The signal disruption worked everywhere. All the controlled humans are free." Jake nodded, but his eyes stayed on the sunrise. "She did it," he said. "Lisa saved everyone." "She saved you too," Amy said quietly. "She gave you back your hope." Jake thought about that as he watched the light spread across the city. For 5 years he had been fighting to survive, fighting to resist, fighting to remember what it meant to be human. But it wasn't until Lisa removed her mask that he truly understood. Being human wasn't about the war or the resistance or even the victory. It was about love that survives when everything else is lost. It was about the connections between people that no alien technology could ever break. It was about choosing to be yourself, even when the whole universe tries to make you into something else. Jake touched the small scar above his left eyebrow, a reminder of a childhood accident Lisa used to tease him about. She had always said it made him look tough, but he knew she loved him despite his scars, not because of them. In the distance, Jake could hear the sound of children playing. Human children, free to grow up in a world where they could choose their own futures. Lisa had given them that gift, and Jake would spend the rest of his life making sure they never forgot the price she had paid for it. The sun was fully up now, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was going to be a beautiful day, and Jake Morrison was alive to see it. That was enough. That was everything.